We're talking today with Mr. Lewis Schmidt of Dorr, Michigan, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay. Now, Mr. Schmidt, can you begin by giving us a little bit of background on yourself?
Where I lived, or
Where were you born?
Allegan, in Allegan County, Dorr, Michigan.
All right. And what year were you born?
11/20/26.
All right. Now, what did your family do while you were growing up?
Worked on a farm.
And what kind of farm?
I think it was mostly pickles and corn and potatoes and anything that we could raise, that, because there was 13 of us in the family, and them were the hard times back in 24, 26 and all those.
Sure.
WPA then.
All right. So would your father do work for that, or I guess it'd be in the 30s mostly?
Well, they had, I don't remember if you've ever seen these old thrashing machines where they did oats, barley, wheat, rye. Well, he had this thrashing machine, gas engine, and he'd go every place, sometime 8-10 miles, and before he got home, the snow was flying already. They stayed out so long because the machines only moved 5 miles an hour with a separator and a tractor, and he had one of them great big tractors with wheels that wide. He didn't ever get out on tarmac, or he got hecked more than once for, trying to cross the road and left real deep marks, so they weren't too happy about that. And then he got on WPA. That didn't pay hardly nothing. And he got that job right in Dorr when they had the railroad there then. And we raised pigs. He'd take 2 sandwiches with bread and lard, and he'd bring one home for us kids. And so, he was my stepdad. Now, he was better than my first dad. My first dad would beat us to death, wasn't for my mother pulling him off of us. And I was kind of tickled when he did pass away. He was only 29 years old when he passed away. He got blood poison in his finger, and he was bullheaded. He wouldn't go to the doctor because he said, "I don't like them doctors." Well, he waited too long. He couldn't pick his arm up anymore. They said, "You ain't got no choice but to go to the hospital." They had to fight him tooth and nail just to get him to the hospital. And when they got him there, it was too late. It was already up by his heart, so he died right there at the hospital. Blood poison. So my mother raised us kids. She had, I'd say around 140 acres, and she had 72 head of cattle. And she did marry. She married a brother to the one that. And anyhow, he was a stepdad, but I'll tell you, he was a wonderful guy. He spanked my back in quite a few times, but I had it coming anyhow. So.
All right. Now, where did you go to school?
Sycamore School, right, just west of Dorr, 1 block.
Okay. And how big a school was that?
Held 29 people. We had 13 in our family, and the neighbors had 17, so we had to leave 1 to home. And that school's been rebuilt now. And it was just one of them old type with a stove in it, and go out in the woodshed and cut wood. And we had some pretty good teachers, and I kind of liked the last one. And every time I go out and pump water, we had to go outside and pump water. And she'd see her boyfriend coming, and she says, "I can pump that water. You go back in school, see if they're doing all right in school." And I said, "How come you always send me back when your boyfriend comes?" "Well, I don't want you out here when he's here. He wasn't supposed to be there in the first place, but we finally caught on to what was going on." So, but if you see the school now, you wouldn't believe it. Oh, fantastic! Instead of 29 kids, why it's up to probably about 200 right now.
Right.
And they bust them all right in where they're 1 block away. I can't see that because we used to have to walk. My mother walked pretty near 8 miles just to go to Hilliard's school. That's where she made her communion, 7 years old. Walked right through all them woods, 7 o'clock, it was still dark. She walked all by herself just to go to communion and make her communion there.
All right. Now, how far did you go in school?
Half a block.
No, in terms of years. Did you go through 8th grade or into high school?
8th grade.
Okay. And so how old were you when you were finished? 14, 13?
Right around there, but I wanted to go in the Navy when I was 16. I lied. You had to be 17. In the Army, you had to be 18. And I lied to my mother. I said, if you make me out a birth certificate, because she never went to a doctor. She never had papers made out, none of us. What do they call it? They call it a surrogate mother or something. They don't go to no doctor. Her sister and her, the neighbor had 17, we had 13, and they all delivered their own babies with help from the sister.
All right. So basically, you didn't have a birth certificate. Now, the war had started by this time?
Yeah, 41 when
Right.
the war started.
Right. So,
I couldn't get in anyhow, I was too young.
right.
I had got a job at Pet Milk when I was 14 years old, but I had to get a certificate showing that I was, she had to swear that I was 14 years old. So I stayed there for, I don't know how many years, till I got 17, 3 years. And when I told them I was going in the Navy, they said, you ain't going in the Navy, you're working here. Well, you just signed some papers that you got a job here. And I started out at 48 cents an hour, which that's a lot of money. Got my first check was $2. And I went in the office and I said, what's wrong? I said, I think you overpaid me. Why? I said, I got whole $2. That was for a week's pay. And I said, no, they said, that's what you had coming. You're only getting 48 cents an hour. And I said, well, my dad gave me 25 cents a week, you know. And I thought, that's funny. I went, and I didn't even cash the check. So next week I worked 4 days and I got $27 and I went back again. And they said, now what's wrong? And I said, I know you made a mistake. $47? I don't get all that kind of money. You know, and it was honest to God truth. And I said, well, I'm going to take it. And they said, you keep coming in here, we're going to fire you. And I said, oh, no, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. One time they called me in and they said, no, not again. No, I said something about a raise or something. Well, you can't get a raise till you're in the union, you know. So I had old Model A, and that thing would run about 3 months on the tank. I was only 7 miles from my work. It was a pet milk company in Wayland. I think Dean Foons owns it now. So I just got mad one day and I says, I'm 17 now, I'm going to the Navy. Well, you ain't gonna get no job when you come back. Why not? Well, you're quitting. Well, yeah, I'm going to the service. You know, they were still drafting them, but I said, I'm enlisting. So I did, I enlisted.
Now, why did you pick the Navy?
Well, I thought, here, I'm gonna have a clean bed to sleep in every night. I ain't gonna have to sleep in a foxhole. And I didn't like ships because I hated the water. I never learned to swim. I took my boot training at Great Lakes, Illinois, Chicago. And we had 13 weeks of basic training, mostly for identifying the German planes and the Japanese planes and the Russian planes, you know, the ones that we were fighting against. And they go so dang fast with that thing. Well, you got to, because when they come over, they're not just going 5 miles an hour. They're through before you can even identify them. And he said, the first thing I'm going to tell you, our chief petty officer said, you will learn to go swim because that's the Navy rules. We cannot keep you in the Navy if you don't know how to swim. And I said, Jesus, the only place we swam was in a creek and it wasn't deep enough to dive or do anything. So 13 weeks went by and they said, you know, graduation's coming up next week. You got 1 week to learn how to swim. So you go up there to the recreation room and get in that swimming pool and learn how to swim, or you ain't going home with your company. So I thought about it and I went up there and I couldn't even dog paddle before I was drinking water out of that thing. And he wasn't happy. He said, you're coming up there tonight and show me that you can swim or you're not going home. He said, crying ain't gonna help you one bit. So I got in the pool where it was shallow, you know, and he says, it don't look good, you know, and he said, quit that crying, you know, because I wanted to go home with the rest of the guys because I thought we could stay together when we go overseas. And I got right up by him. I said, I'm going to show that guy I can swim. I didn't come up. Got the old grappling hook and got a hold of my trunks and pulled me up. And I'm all, oh, you all right? And I'm still coughing. And he said, oh, I don't know if I should pass you or not. He said, what are you trying to prove, Schmidt? I said, I wanted to show you I could swim. He said, do me a favor, or a dive. I said, I wanted to show you I could dive. He said, do me a favor. He said, show me you can swim first, and I'll pass you 100%. I said, I don't know how to swim. He said, you know what? Just for the effort, and we'll let you go home with the rest of the guys, the Navy guys. And I could have given him a hug or a kiss. I was so happy. But I did. I don't know how to, this day how to swim.
All right. Now, also in basic training, did they put a lot of emphasis on learning military discipline?
Well,
Orders?
I knew one thing. The first thing is sir. Sir. I said, I never said that to home, well, you will here. What did I just tell you? Yes, sir. You know? And I was tired from going through the stuff at Detroit there to, you know, to get into the Navy. Mm-hmm. And boy, they were so nice to me. Oh, get him a chair. Thank you. I didn't say sir or nothing. Raise your right hand. Swore me in. Where'd you get that chair from? Sir. Take it back where you got it. I didn't get it, sir. I remember that, sir, you know, and it went on, and then pretty soon they said, you're catching a train to Chicago. I ain't like Larry. I want to fly over there, but anyhow, because I never flew before, but anyhow, we was on the train. It was midnight. I couldn't stay awake. Schmidt, you're on duty tonight. What's duty? Sir, what's duty? You just walk around the compound and that, or you find a rag in a building or something, you see something ain't right, why just pick it up and ask the petty chief officer if you're doing all right. He's waiting and waiting. I said, sir, that's better, you know. They want you to call him sir. So we got through 13 weeks of training, and I only made one mistake. When we put our pants on, you had to fold it so this crease came here, and he ran his hand right up to the crack of my whatchacall. He said, that's the way I want it. Well, I got up late, and that didn't run the way it was supposed to. I just pulled them on and left them loose. And you are on report. He tapped me on the back, and the old guy wrote my name out. You will run out on a compound with a rifle over your head 1 hour. And I thought, oh, that's going to be easy. Oh, God, I couldn't, both my arms ached. But I found out to dress right, and I'm telling you, and then one time on the gate in the building, the back door where you come in, you always have your feet like this, so when you click them, you can read it. He wanted to hear him ring in his ear that I came to attention. And he said, well, I'm going to give you a warning next time you don't do that. You'll be running around with a rifle over your head. And I thought, I better learn that. And this is like 2 o'clock in the morning. I just couldn't take it. And then I got a pretty good job. I used to have to go down in the room and keep the fire going at night. They had that, I don't know what they call that kind of coal they burn. It was real loose stuff, like it was all like gravel. And I like that. And I didn't know, I thought I was on my own, you know. So the guy said, if you don't do that, you're going to go carry that rifle again. So, and I did get to graduate. The company next to us, there was a bunch of gals, you know, in the Navy, but they were, what do they call them?
Waves.
Yeah, and set the company back 1 week for whistling at the people. But we graduated, and I got 14-day leave to home. And then we went to, after I got my 14-day leave, they shipped us to San Francisco. And we stayed down there about 2 or 3 weeks until they found a ship that they could put us on, which was a carrier, the Prince Williams, baby carrier that, where the wings fold up, but they're only half wings, so you said they don't take all the room up on the top deck. They couldn't fly them off of there unless they assembled it. Right. We wasn't even out of San Francisco. It was midnight probably when we got a scare submarine in the area in San Francisco. Now it could have been Japanese, it could have been Russia. We don't know what ship it was. It could have been a German sub, but anyhow, we had not abandoned ship, but we had to go topside, and the alarm went off, and we didn't know what the red light was there for. It's in every room where your quarters were. And we stayed up on topside all night long. nothing happened. Well, I didn't think they would do anything in the stateside like that with a submarine, or I don't think they got out of the States, to be truthful. So we got by on that. Took us 29 days to get over to Brisbane, Australia. And food wasn't that good, I'll tell you that. But as soon as we got over there, why, our base was AATC, Anna Aircraft Training Center. We trained people off of the ships to come into our base in Brisbane, Australia, and they trained on the gun line. 3-inch, twin 40s, those ones with the round barrels on them, and you just sit there and pull the trigger until your little hat falls off. And then they had an Aussie plane that came over pulling this big round chute. It's a sleeve about 40 feet long. And as soon as they come over the gun line, they'd say, fire, commence. And then when they were done, they'd say, commence firing. And anyhow, when they got done, that sleeve wasn't about a foot or two long, because they just shredded that dang sleeve. One time it was so close, they took a piece of the tail off, and that plane didn't stay very straight. And when they tried that again, and happened to be a general on the base. Nobody knew he was a general, because they don't come dressed all the time in a general's uniform. And that guy got court-martialed, because he told the guys down on the gun line, take the tail off if you want. They believed him, but they got too close. All that was left was the cable on it, a little bitty short 4-foot cable. Now that's too dang close, because all that stuff is well, you can see when it explodes, the smoke.
Yep.
When he saw that, he got hold of the radio guy and said, have him come down, I want to talk to him. He didn't come back the next day, because I think he got court-martialed.
All right. Let's back up a little bit. That trip you took on the small carrier, what do you remember about the crossing? Was it easy, or did you get sick? Or
Sick. Putting the head in the train up there. They have a big trough where you sit down and do your job and pee in, and you have to grab some of them guy's head and let that big old turd like that go across so the guy didn't suck it in, And I said, oh my God. And I can remember on another ship, it was a LCI, just a small ship, just transporting us from one base to another. And they said, you're not allowed to use the ship crew's head. That's the bathroom. So they built a big thing on the back of the screen. It was safety though, and that's where we had to squat down and set the rear end over it and let it fly. No paper, because they knew we'd throw the toilet paper in the water, and that old wave would come up and how we were already washed. And this is honest to God truth now. And now comes chow time, so they give us, there was 14 of us guys that was just riding it to another base. They gave us a little box with rations. That's supposed to last us 14 days. We ate it the first night. The rest of the time we was fighting the ship's crew. There was 3-4 of us standing at the door. One would trip him, and when he let go of the tray, the other one would grab the tray. And this is honest truth, that chicken was still with feathers on it yet. They just threw it on the grill, and then he didn't have that decency to burn the feathers off of it. And then until they got guards up there. So now we got to figure out how in the heck we can get our free meal, because the rations went out the first night. So we practically starved. We didn't shave or nothing. Wouldn't brush our teeth, because they wouldn't let us use none of their stuff. And finally, when we got to where we was going, they said they took us off of the ship in Brisbane, and they said, what do you want to do first, wash up or? No, we put a new hole right through the screen door. It's the honest truth. We put a hole. We walked in there, and they said, your food ain't quite ready. We just went back in the kitchen and said, hey, we're hungry right now. We don't care if it's cooked or not. We had it that way on that ship, by God, just stealing. And he said, I don't recognize you people. He said, did you have no water? Nothing to bathe or anything? And on Christmas night, that little ensign, he only had that little bitty bar here in the scholar. he threw us beer, each one a beer down. Well, hell, when it hit the floor, there was no beer to drink. Once you snap that off, it was nothing but foam. He wouldn't come down there because we probably would have committed community or whatever they call it. And I said, boy, especially on Christmas. And then he gave us the literature. You don't tell your folks or anybody back home anything would happen. And I said, that's the first thing I'm going to tell them when I get back home. So then we got down in Brisbane. I stayed there 12 months. We was walking out on a beach, and all of a sudden the guy said, where you at? I'm probably about 50 feet behind him before he noticed me, that I was behind. He said, what's the matter? I said, I don't know. Get me up. My back right here in the hips went out. So they carried me back to the first aid station, and they said, what's wrong? And I said, I don't know. They said, well, you're going to Brisbane down there in a hospital. You're going in there for a while until we find out what's wrong with you. Till this day, they never told me what happened, but something gave out, and they said, now we got bad news for you. I said, I know. You're going to discharge me. Oh, and I didn't want to get discharged. I loved it over there. So they kept me there probably a month or two. Said, now you got to make a decision. Operation. Is it an easy one? We ain't going to guarantee you nothing. Said, you got to call your parents, tell them what's going to happen. You got to get their consent, which was a good thing, I thought. She said, well, what did they tell you what's wrong with you? I explained to them that my back went out, but they haven't found the problem. To this day, I never did find out what the problem was, and they didn't discharge me. I made the right choice. I didn't get the operation because they said you could be crippled for life, so I made a choice. I did. I said, forget it. Kept me another couple weeks, and then they sent me back to the base. And I made the right decision because I'm going to be 84 in November. And now I'm starting to feel it in my back.
All right. What was your daily routine like while you were based in Australia? What would you do day to day?
Mostly gun watch,
Okay.
which was on a gate watch. We had our perimeter. You'd have to walk around the perimeter at night so nobody could sneak in and do any kind of damage. And anyhow, I usually got most of the gate watch where they let you wear a 45, and the gate had to be locked. Then when the commander came down, he lived way up on a hill. Boy, if you didn't salute him, you had to report to him and find out why you didn't salute him. He was a lieutenant commander. And a lot of the gals came right down by the base, but they couldn't get inside. So all you could kind of do is reach through that fence to either hold their finger, because it wasn't big enough where you could put your hand through there. And a lot of hanky-panky going on, I knew that. And boy, if you ever got caught, why, you were court-martialed. So I kind of liked that. And we stayed there for a year and a half, and then we went up to Philippines.
Okay. Now, while you were living in Australia, did you get to go off base periodically and into town?
Anytime we had liberty, why, we was allowed, and they come and take us in one of them small trucks with a canvas over it, and they take us down there to Brisbane, and we'd stay there at it was something like the Red Cross, and you'd sign up and they'd give you a bed, and first one comes, first one served. And they had a nice little restaurant down there where you could get a sandwich and a pop, and I really liked it down there. Then we'd go to the bar. Some of them they had to carry back to that little Jeep that they took us back in, and commander would say, wow, you stay up all night? And that beer was so strong. I was only 17 years old when I got overseas. Put me under the shower, and I stayed in there for 6 hours under that shower. Just passed out. I was so drunk that my mother would have saw me, she'd have disowned me.
All right. And were the Australians friendly? Did they like the Americans?
Well, not really. All of them Aussies were up New Guinea fighting. So we took over the town, and one guy, his name was Cobb. I can't remember his first name. Anyhow, he had while he was up fighting, he was shacking with her up there in a hotel, and anyhow, when they started bringing them back from New Guinea, you know, close to the war was just about getting over. This guy came, husband came home, caught him. He knew what was going on, so when he was going up to the third room, he had 4 guys with him, rode him in the elevator, and they stopped at the halfway. They had to rush him to the hospital. Busted out all of his teeth, and his face looked like he got hit with a tank. And I bet you he never done that again. And they were mad, boy, I'll tell you. Oh, and then they wrote, the Aussies wrote people letters, said you ought to be paying for your kid. That went right to the Navy Department, and I never paid nothing. This one gal, she'd go with nobody but sailors. She wouldn't go with a Marine or Army guy or just sailors. I was going to bring her home, but she wouldn't come. She was about 16, good looking. Oh man, I wanted to bring her home, but my mother said, "You're lucky you didn't bring her home. I'd have threw both of you out of the house." I thought, well, that ain't nice, Mother, you know. She always said, you guys get somebody pregnant, you build your nest, you take care of them women. And that always held for us out of 13 kids. So, but I did like the Navy on one reason is I couldn't swim. I had that, sometimes they had these belts with a glass in them where you just pinch them together and the glass breaks and that thing inflates. Right. I even wore it to church. I wore it when I went to bed. I wore it when I was in the truck because you know, you never know what's going to happen. And the lieutenant said, "You can't be wearing that all the time." I said, "Well, if something happens, I want that on. If I go on a ship, I want that on because I can't swim." And I should have never told him that because he said, "You're going to swim before you leave here." And I thought, oh, maybe that's that same guy that was chief petty officer at Great Lakes. But I never, till this day, I still don't know how to swim. And I'm a hell of an ice fisherman. And I fell through the ice 9 times. You'd think I'd learn. And the last time, the 10th time, the truck went in. And I'm still here today, believe it or not.
All right. Now, so you spent most of your time in the Navy on-shore duty, essentially, working
on-shore duty. The only time I get on a ship, I went on, well, it's on the paper. It's 9 different ships that I went on.
And that was just to take you
Just
from...
transporting, moving from like San Francisco, the Philippines, Manila, just on different bases where we could set up a base and have our own base and teach the guys. And Manus Island was the main base where they come in for on the ships, and they'd park there, and we'd go get them in vehicles. And I was supposed to be a plumber, 3rd class, and I drove truck all the time. So I said, "Hey, as long as you give me the rank, I'll take it," you know. So I ended up just 3rd class. I didn't get any higher because I'm a truck driver. I like that, and then shifts are on this side. I was going backwards more than I was forward. They shift so funny, you know. You're steering with this end, and you're shifting over here, and you're not even looking back, you know. And then I'd go get the guys, and all the guys are sitting on the roof, and their feet over the tailgate. And I got stopped by the shore patrol. They wrote me up a ticket, said, "You ought to go to get a court martial for that, because, you know, the other one in back of you would run into you, you'd probably cut their legs right off," because the tailgate was always down. He made me sit inside of the box and then push the tailgate shut, but yet they were setting up on top.
All right. So that was on Manus Island when that happened, or?
Yeah.
Can you describe Manus a little bit? It's not a place people know much about.
No, it was just something where we picked where the docks were, and we had to drive down there about 10 miles to pick them up, and then when they got done firing on the gun line, we'd take them back to their ships, and then come back, and we was racing with one another. We didn't see that shore patrol jeep sitting there.
Now, were you on Manus before or after you went to the Philippines?
No. Just happened to be on Brisbane gun line there in Australia. Then we went up to the Philippines. Now that was altogether different. That was it was a nice base, and we were just waiting for orders, you know, to transfer. We was going to go down to what the heck was it? Indian Ocean down below that, and what we was going to do, there was going to be an invasion, and that's as close as we come to really getting into the thick of the war, because when we was on that other base there, we didn't do nothing but, you know, gun training and that, and when they give us orders that we were going to board a ship, and I said, oh no, that would have been the 10th one. We had already had our gear packed, and it was on a Sunday. Got the good news that they dropped the bomb on Hiroshima. They said, all you people that was getting ready to ship out, you're going to have to get your gear off of the ship because you're going home. Oh God, everybody was hugging and kissing everybody, and we were just going crazy, you know. And we couldn't believe it until we got on the ship, you know, to go home. And anyhow, while we was on our way home, they made a pool. They always have a pool of money, you know, that you want to bet on. So they had this one. He'd open these letters up. They'd come about that wide. There was probably 100, 200 letters, and they had a dollar bill in each one of them. There was 300 and some dollars in those envelopes. I won the whole thing when I got in San Francisco, when we dropped the anchor. I guessed the right time. They called me up front, and I thought, oh God, now they're probably going to talk me into re-signing or do something, you know, which they did. And they said, you got your ticket with you? What ticket? A ticket for you bought. What time they was going to drop the anchor? There's $310 in it. And I said, you mean I won it? Yeah, because they said, Louis Schmidt, shipfare 3rd class, report to the captain's quarters now. I said, oh God, they're going to keep me in here. They said, you just won the pool. Here's your $310. We had no money on us, so I didn't know what to do with it. I said, well, keep it in the safe until I get to the stateside, and then I'll put it in my pocket. Because hell, they probably got in my locker and took the money. So anyhow, they give us a 34-day leave. Call us back. Said you got to be here at the Great Lakes Training Center for discharge. Then they give you that little ruptured duck up here that shows you your discharge. Boy, we got back there and we had our black sun suit. We had the regular flat top hat. They'd throw up a salute to you, and I thought, what the heck's going on? I'm only a 3rd class shipfare. I ain't supposed to be getting saluted, but they didn't know the difference, you know. They see us all in uniform, and a lot of guys had their medals on already. And boy, I'd throw up a salute, carry on, sailor, you know. Yes, sir. They even call it sir.
Okay, now let's go back. When you were on the Philippines, what kind of place were you based? Was it in the city or off just a naval base? Or
We had our own base there. They had huts, you know, put up, and we'd stay in there. If they needed us for something, why, we was just more or less getting ready to ship out there to the China Sea, because we'd be going probably 6 months until that bomb dropped. And I'm kind of glad we lasted out as long as we did.
Right. What did you, while you were in the Philippines, did you see much of any of the local population, or did you travel around at all?
Nope, we had to stay right on base. We got to pick up stuff that was, well, when they bombed that place there, why, there was jeeps and tanks and anything you wanted to see. They were mostly the Japs, because they bombed the heck out of that place, and all that stuff inside melted, and some of the bones were still in there yet. And I said, boy, it was hell there. And then, remember they raped all the nuns down there? Boy, that was hell to pay. Now, those were all saints and nuns, and it didn't bother them none. They raped them anyhow. And one thing that I remember when we got close to when they dropped the bomb in that, is they don't give the other countries anything of ours, which they do. They leave tanks there. It would cost the United States too much to ship all that back. They had probably a 40-acre field. I wanted to try to get some pictures, but as soon as they checked your camera before you got on, they emptied it. They had about a 40-acre field, and on that 40 acres, they had from tanks, jeeps, ambulances, any kind of vehicle they had there. They took it, even planes, they set all that stuff afire. Brand new stuff. Never took the Cosmo, the grease and stuff off of it. Guns, because they said if we give them to them, they'll use them against us. So they just lit it afire, and I said, if I could only bought some pictures back, I'd have took that right to the White House. Said, here's where your tax money goes, right? They said, well, you probably just made that up. You don't make up something like that when you got a 40-acre field. It looked like a war over there with that, everything black burning, you know. You knew what it was. And I just couldn't believe that they'd do that, you know.
Well, other Navy veterans who were stationed in places where, or just people who were on those islands in the Pacific, they said the same thing, that they would destroy equipment or they'd dump it in the ocean or whatever else. But
well, those Filipino guys, the natives and that up there in the Philippines, they had all them shacks that they lived in. Some of them had straw on the top, but it was a nice place for them to live. The Marines came in there, didn't give them a warning or nothing. Just lit that stick with a gas on it and threw it in the door, and away they went. They burned that whole little town down. Boy, I thought that's dirty. And they used to work for us, the Filipinos. They worked for us, quarter a day. That or 2 meals a day of rice. That's all they fed them was rice. And they loved it, but at least they got rice every 2 days. You know,
so you had some working on the base then?
Yeah, they'd help us out, and I said, then they'd turn around and do that dirty work to them, you know? That was dirty. Every place they went, boy, lights and siren, and the Marines behind them. They didn't have a chance in hell, really. They had to go sleep out in the woods when they got done because they had to find a place to. Then towards the last, they were putting them up huts, so they had some place to stay. And they were good workers. They'd do your washing for you and your sewing. And one kid was in the Navy was staying there as long as he come back to the base the next day. He had a pair of hip boots. We seen him coming. We said, "My God, TJ, I can't believe you're dressed like a civilian." You know, the commander even laughed. You know, but he liked the gal and he was going with her. So they said, "Hell, there's nothing wrong with that." And they never had no place to go to the bathroom. Everything was outside. Get up in the morning and all you could see is them white butts out there going to the bathroom. So finally they built a couple outhouses with double bottom, stools to sit on. And she'd say, "Joe, pass me the paper." He sat right next to you. You never knew it because of the way they dress. Why, you don't know if it's a man or a woman. No problem. "Thank you, Joe." Walk out, and then he said, "The hell, what are you doing there with that woman?" I said, "She come and use the bathroom." There was another seat in there, so they finally made them use their own. And if they caught some kind of disease, from sex, $300 fine, and they had to stay in the hospital 30 days until they cured them. But they were right back again as soon as they got out of the jail, so. Boy, that line there was 10 miles long with people getting clapped and syphilis, and they finally straightened it up though. They finally got them to go to the doctors and show them a bill of health.
So you got a lot of education you weren't really expecting to get when you joined the Navy.
I was no smarty. I told them one time in the Navy, you got to learn how to tie 7 knots. In case you're on a ship, you got to do the bowling on the bight where you can make a loop, throw it on shore on a boat next to you so you can come on their boat, And then when you come into dock, you got to hit that big thing that holds the boat, pulls it back into what you call, and I'm calling this boatswain mate, which he was ahead of us. I said, "I ain't learning that crap," and I didn't know he was sitting in the outhouse. "Oh, so you're the one that's telling me you ain't gonna make them knots? Well, you're gonna do triple. You're gonna learn how to do 15 knots instead of 7 knots. You're going to learn to do 20 knots instead of 7 knots. Whew. I was so sick of looking at knots, I didn't even want to do them anymore.
Did you do better with the knots?
Oh, yeah. I mean, heck, they come in handy. I use them to home a lot, like pulling the rope. It's bowling on the bight. In other words, you flip it away and it tightens up. And the guy pulling it takes off, and the old log trees that they were pulling out that built on the property came right along with them, and some of them you can make a ladder out of them. Got rungs across it and everything. And it was something that they disciplined you on. And
Sure. Okay. Now, of the different ships that you rode around in, I mean, was the LCI probably the worst one? Okay. Which was the best, do you think?
the carrier.
Okay.
But the LST, you know, that's kind of a flat, long one. You got them 20-foot, 30-foot ramps on the front. They're about that thick. All you do is hit the button and the cable drops and it lets you down, so when you come up on the beach, you just run off of there and probably 40, 50 people, soldiers and sailors could get off quick. Well, we was about 3 days out from shore, that whole plate fell off. Right while I was out to sea. That's what we were doing. Everybody said, well, this is our last trip. And somehow or another, we limped into, I can't remember, it was either Samar or Anahuitok that we limped into, and it had, probably 2-3 feet of water in it, but it didn't sink, because you close all your hatches and doors and that, it'll stay afloat, because, you know, there's no way water can get in there. Mm-hmm. And we made it in there, and I thought, well, I'm doing everything to stay alive, and by God, just like that carrier I was on, 3 weeks after I got off of it, they sunk it.
All right. What ship did you take when you went back to the States?
It was like a cargo where they could feed you all, and we had probably 700 people on there. But we made pretty good time going back, a lot faster than going to Australia. Mm-hmm. But I was sick all the time. Now they got a pill that they give you, and there's something that they spray behind your ear that helps you out a lot too. But we had 700 soldiers on there on that one. And that sergeant of theirs was eating a pickle all the time on the way over. He made them all sick. He said, don't bother me none. It's their tough luck that they don't like pickles.
Now, did you ever get used to it? I mean, did you get to the point where you didn't get sick anymore?
Yeah, after, you know, but if you don't go on it right away, because how you're out of base probably 1 year, 13 months, and then you just get on it again, and it seems like the weather down there was always windy and soft, and you could see these big whales come out right side of the ship. You didn't think there was no end to them. And then them flying fish, they got wings on them. Boy, they'd go for 50, 100 feet before they'd hit the water. I never dreamed I'd see anything like that. Not size fish like that with wings on them. They'd come out of the water and fly right over the top, and God was that interested. But you wanted to take pictures, but they kept pretty quiet. I sure would have liked to got the ones of that place burning, I'll tell you that.
All right. Now, once you get back to the States, and they discharge you, and you're out, what did you do then after you were out of the Navy?
Well, I was looking for a job, and I went back to Pet Milk, because that was paying about $4 probably then, or $2 or $4. And they said, no, you left, you just left here, you can't get your job back. And jobs were, you could find them if you looked long enough. And they said, no, we're not taking you back. So I went to the union, because they had a union in there. They said, you give him notice to come back. And by God, about 2 days, they called me and they said, I walked up there and I said, I'm here to reporting for my job back. No, we got rid of you. I said, you better go talk to the union. So I got a hold of the union. They said, you give him his job back. And they said, no, we don't have to. Yes, you do. We're the union here. He was in the union, so he gets his job back. So I worked for him 4 months, I think. I found out that Calibrator was his hired. Boy, they were a big outfit, refrigerators. And the guy that was a good friend of mine in Door, he said, come on down and put an application in. He said, they're hiring. So he said, make sure you talk to Gordon Fox, who's a personnel manager. And I said, okay. So He said, you got steel toes with you? Well, there he had to wear steel toes. I said, no. He said, well, you get yourself a pair of steel toes and you can go to work this afternoon. Holy God. I said, I'll tell you what, I'll go tomorrow and pick up a pair and I'll be in the afternoon. What do you want me on? He says, you can come on days or 3 to 11. I said, oh, I'd kind of like that 3 to 11. Well, I found out I didn't have enough seniority, you know. One day you ain't going to make it. So they said they can keep you on for 30 days. The union says it's to see if we're going to hire you, you know, but keep you. If you're a good worker, we're going to keep you. So they said, boy, best worker we got, my boss said. And it was a real good friend of mine, my boss. I got in the union and I wouldn't do what I was supposed to do, and he said, you're lucky. If I knew you was going to be like this, I'd have threw you out of the door myself. He said, you're about the laziest one we got here. So anyhow, I started picking up, and they said, well, we got bad news. What now? I said, you got to go on 11 to 7. I thought that was only for the colored people. No, they said, you will go on 11 to 7, and I didn't like what I was doing. Just hang in there. He said, you got another hour yet. You get off at 7 o'clock, 11 to 7. He said, go over in that ice cold water in that tank where they check the metal out, you know, they cool it off. He said, stick your head in there, I bet that'll wake you up. Oh, I was freezing then, you know. And come by and they said, you want to work 4 over? Yeah, I was wide awake now, you know. So on the way home, oh boy, pull that old steering wheel back. I was getting tired then because we put the heat on in there, and that put me right to sleep. And pretty soon they come back and they said, hey, you want to go on days? I said, I'll try it for a while. Well, the union found out that I was in the union, and they said, you got to go by seniority here. Well, the guy I was driving high-low, which I wanted, he had 5 years there. Hell, I didn't even have 2 months there, and I was trying to get on days already. He said, when you get 5 years, you can take my job, because I'll be taking another one. Hell, it was 10 years before I got the high-low job. But I liked it. And then I got, we moved boxcars in and out of the Reynolds yard. And I had one of them little track mobiles that ran on rails. That thing could move 7 to 8 cars at a time. Boy, and I love that. I just sit there, take a nap, and they'd come out and get me when they wanted some cars moved. And then I got to drive the truck around inside of the yard. And the ditch ran through there. I'd sneak under there and go across the road and get something to eat. And I got away with it. Union would back me up. And one time I remember I got real snotty with union, with my boss. She was a lady. She says, when I talk to you, Snuffy, you look at me. What's up there? She said, you keep looking, and boy, that place was loaded with pigeons. You never knew when you was going to get crapped on. So she fired me, 25 years. I said, oh, I screwed. I knew when I did that, I used the F word. And then she'd always grab me by the arm and yank my arm around. She said, when I talk to you, you look at me. I said, do I have to? Yes, you do. I'd look at her a while, and then I'd turn my head. And I got real snotty with her, and they fired me the second time. Boy, I had a hard time getting back, but the union backed me up. And the personnel manager said, you know, you've only had one warning here in 27 years and 25 years. I said, that's all. And it was my own fault. I didn't call in sick or that I wasn't going to show up. I went fishing. Said, talk to your boss. And this was from the supervisor. Said, if he agrees with you, why, we'll tear the pink slip up. I said, why didn't you call? I said, this place wasn't worth a dime. That was a goofy mistake right there. But they give me time off and call me back, and from then on I kept my nose clean. That was a beautiful place to work. I put 31 years in.
All right. Now, if you look back at the time that you spent in the Navy, what effect do you think that had on you? Did it change you, or did you learn anything?
You better believe it, man. I was a man then. I was, went in when I was, tried to get in when I was 17. When I was 21, then they tried to talk me into re-signing. I wish I would have got in the reserves, because I could have, every 6 months I could have went on a ship, and they had to let me go from Reynolds. I could go on that ship. And I just said, nope, I'm taking the ruptured duck. And I loved it. After I got to be a pro, I loved the Navy, man. I come out a hero, let me tell you. But I never got into no fighting, never even come close to. I remember one bad time I had was we were about 10 miles from the base, and there was an air base that checked all airplane motors. They'd rebuild them and that, and they were about 10 miles away, and a plane come over, treetop level. It come over so fast we couldn't tell, but they still think it was a Japanese plane. Didn't drop no bomb or anything. They come over the baseline. I was standing guard on the baseline, sitting right on a keg of dynamite, really, the big shells that we used on the guns. Here's this guy puffing on a cigarette, Oh, and then he heard something. There was all palm trees around the base out of the gun line. What's that? What's that? Well, when them coconuts hit the ground, I swear to God, the Japs were out there, so he put the alarm out. Here come the whole Navy base. Where they at? Listen, yep, we can hear it, we can hear it. What they didn't know was that the coconuts were dropping off the trees. It was that time of the year. Here come the whole base, boy, everybody with guns and whatnot all. And I was supposed to go down to that air base to tell them, blackout, they got a blackout. No lights, no nothing. We're going down the road 50 miles an hour, and I didn't have a side mirror. Took it right off. He was coming to tell us to put all the lights out. I went that way to tell him to put the lights out. And this lieutenant at the base gave me the Thompson subgun. That shoots about 30 rounds per second. And he handed it to me. When he did, he knocked the clip in there. When you put the clip in, and I had my hand on the trigger when I got over there, I put 30 rounds in that Quonset hunt they lifted, what they were working. I put 30 holes in there. I can't believe it that they were out already, because they didn't dare stay in the base, stay in that hut, that thing that they do all their airplane work. So they were quite a ways from me, but when I jumped out, I went like this. I didn't mean to, but I had my hand on there. I put 30 holes in that Quonset hunt. I thought I could have got court-martialed. I could have got court-martialed and discharged, but they didn't do it to me. I had a lieutenant that felt sorry for me. He said it was an accident. Yeah, it could have been a costly one if I'd have killed somebody, but it was lucky. Not all them 30 people. I got off. I had to do some work, extra work that they'd sign you to for doing that. I got wrote up for it, but I still like the civilian life. And got that job with Reynolds, 31 years, and I put 8 years at Calvinator, and that's when work was easy to find. And sometime when I got on unemployment, I'd lie a little bit, and I'd go to the places that weren't hiring, so they would accept that, Got 30 weeks without, getting a job, until they caught up with me. I lied in the door, that feed mill. Everything's in big 100-pound bags, 50-pound bags, and I lied like hell. I said, I can't lift that stuff. I said, they didn't want me anyhow. They went and they called them and they said, we never told them that, and shut my pay off.
Oh, well. All right. Anything else that kind of stands out in your mind about the time you spent in the Navy that you haven't mentioned here yet?
Well, I had it pretty easy. I mean, I didn't get they tried me out. Well, yeah, you got to take practice on the guns and that. And the only thing they told me that I made a mistake was I froze on the trigger. I had one of them just sitting there going like crazy until my helmet fell off. And, well, it'll knock your helmet right off of you. Them things got a lot of concussions on them. And then I never did take the gun test, which you got to take a gun apart. And there was one guy there, he could take it apart and put it back together blindfolded. I said, I ain't never going to do that. But most generally, I just stood gun line watch on the gate and then do the rifle with around the compound. And but mostly it was with a 45 automatic. And I kind of liked that job. And ship, I couldn't stand the ships. Them bunk mids went up there 40 feet. I'm looking down and you gotta use each bunk bed to get back down because they're only that high. You wanna pick up your head and about knock yourself out. And that was a cargo ship, and it was one nice one to be on because boy, they fed you good. What would you like for eggs? You know, sunny side up. How would you like your toast? How would you like your bacon? I thought, what the hell, am I home already? You know, and boy, that was a cargo ship, and boy, that was a big one too. And that baby steamed right along. And time you got to San Francisco, why, you knew you got treated right. The ship's crew, boy, they'd talk to you. And boy, some of them guys there, especially on that LST, the guy had 31 years on there. And he was right up in the bow of the ship, and he had a manhole right up there so he could get out quick, like, you know. And they're like this, like a fish, in and out, in and out. But I'd like to go back on a ship again, you know, just for a visit. I know I'd get seasick, but then the funniest part was I had my 34-day leave. They called me back in, and we got down to, what's that channel there? Here in the States, that they were fighting over. It's a big channel where the ships go way up and then you get over on the other side and you're out to sea again. Panama Canal.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
You are going back overseas. I said, why would they want to do that? I only got a month to go and I'm discharged. They must have looked at the records, and the old commander said, you are going home. I said, well, I only got 30, that's why we're discharging you. You only got 30 days. Why would they put you on a ship and send you out to China? He was I happy. Just the day before that, he was on way on top, looking the scenery over, and I go,
Oh.
Louis Schmidt, report to the top deck. And I said, why did I do that? I'm free, I'm out of here, you know, getting a discharge. That's when he told me that you win some money, you know. And I thought, thank you, sir, thank you, sir, thank you, sir, you know. I thought sure he was going to say, was you giving me the finger? He didn't even mention anything about it. But I was glad to get home, but I wish I would have stayed in the reserves. I could be going on the ship anytime, you know.
All right. Well, it makes for a good stories, or a good bunch of stories, so thanks for coming on in and talking to me today.
But you can go on and on and on and on and on, you know, the different places that what you did.
All right.